Jim Crow laws began around the 1870s, which was the end of the Reconstruction era, and ended around the 1960s. They were put in place to separate African Americans from whites in different aspects of their lives. This was discrimination. One Jim Crow law required that blacks and whites attend separate schools for education. How were schools for you growing up? Was it segregated or integrated?
I moved to an integrated neighborhood in 1958. So the schools I went to were integrated then. The schools I went to before then in in preschool were in segregated neighborhoods because that they were elementary schools and the neighborhoods were black. In 1954, when the federal government made it illegal for school segregation, Baltimore complied right away. So schools were opened up, and like I said, if you lived in the neighborhood, you could go to attend the neighborhood school.
What were the condition of books you received during segregation? Did the condition of materials change when it was integrated?
As far as I know, books were taken from white schools when they were old and given to black schools. I actually didn't have to worry about that because I went to preschool at a special, even though it was all black school, it was a special school, and then later I went to an integrated school. But it was like a running joke that that all the school the segregated schools were not equal.
Did you have trouble at the library?
Um, we moved to Windsor Hill, Forest Park, Windsor Hill area, and Forest Park in the 50s, and I didn't go to a lot walk to a library until I was in the third grade. So the neighborhood library, like the schools, were open to everyone.
Did you have friends you couldn't hang around with because of segregation? How did you hang with them?
I remember having some really good friends in the third grade. In fact, we became friends and stayed friends all the way through high school. And they were white, and I was black, and I was in a integrated brownie troop. But my parents were very open, so they did not tell me not to play with children in my class. Other parents would not let their children, even though they went to integrated schools, would not let their black children play with white children after school.
Describe how the restrooms and water fountains were for you here in Baltimore. There were some water fountains and restrooms that were labeled colored and or white. Was it the same way for you here in Baltimore?
I didn't see any restrooms labeled color. People a little older than me did experience that. I did not. I do know that when we went downtown, you could not go to a restroom in a restaurant that you could not sit down and eat in. So it was kind of like you had to pick places to go to the bathroom. I assume, but it didn't really affect me because I wasn't old enough.
Blacks and whites couldn't live in the same public housing before 1954, which it was integrated in Baltimore. How was life in your neighborhood? Was it segregated or integrated? Did whites live there?
Actually, we lived in projects before we moved to an 95% white neighborhood. So we lived in a project, and the project that we lived in was all black. But like you said, in Baltimore City, they made it a law, and that that the public housing was open, and it was not segregated, starting in the 50s. Like I said, we moved close to the same time into like I said, basically all white, mostly Jewish neighborhood, and I mean, they still have areas in Baltimore City today that are basically mostly, all white, or mostly black. That's the way they still have discrimination in that.
Name television shows you thought displayed segregation.
There was a telephone show in the 60s, and I was, young. I couldn't go on the show because it was a Buddy Dean show, and all the white teenagers went on, and they tried out. It was a big thing, and they wanted to dance on a Buddy Dean show, and this was a totally local show, and black blacks were not allowed to dance with whites on that show, and blacks could only dance. I don't know if it was once a week or once a month. They had a black show, and all the black kids could get on. So we had less opportunity to get on TV with it, and I believe there was a big commotion because many people that were on the show didn't mind integration, but of course it was the policy of the station and the Buddy Steen show to keep everything separate, and that was in the '60s. In fact, they talk about it in a movie called Hairspray, which is based in Baltimore.
Describe to me your shopping experience growing up. Did the shopping clerks treat you differently because you were black?
Oh, definitely. When we went to shop downtown, for a while, blacks could not try on clothes downtown. Um, my parents had an account at Hochul Combs, and one year my sister and I were sent downtown to do Christmas shopping, like after Christmas, and buy stuff. And the store inspector followed us the whole time we were in the store. I don't know why, but I assume he thought that we were stealing. I don't know. But there was a lot of discrimination. The sales clerks themselves were white.
The Equal Employment Ordinance was enacted in Baltimore in 1956. What jobs do you remember not being available to black people?
There were no black tellers at that time. Even when they enacted the law, it took a while before they even had black tellers in the bank. There were no. I didn't see a black bus driver for a long time, even though they may have hired some right afterwards. The city's pretty big, so maybe in my area I just didn't see any for until the early '60s. The same thing with the firemen. They just started hiring them probably in the '50s. Then I believe the police had black officers before then, but those places they didn't. And like I said, downtown, when we used to get on the elevator at Braga Gutman's. Uh, White people then had elevator jobs. Black people couldn't even get those at the time until later on.
Did you ever go swimming? Where did you go? Did you have to go to a separate swimming area than the whites?
Yes, the beaches, of course, that's a hot spot. Beaches were always segregated. So in Maryland, um, they were black beaches. They were private black beaches. Cars, Spencer's, Sparrows, black beaches. White people had the majority of the beaches, and then the state parks opened up and were segregated. I mean, were integrated. And when they first integrated, they had designated areas. Part of the beachfront was for white, and part of it was for blacks. And then later on, when they totally opened up completely, um, white people just didn't go there. You just didn't see them there. So that was that.
I just interviewed Cheryl Anderson from Baltimore City, and this concludes the interview on segregation.